This is not an absolute end-all, be-all. Everything that we need to, this isn't a complete synopsis on what's going on in the family in the 21st century. But I think the place where we actually display our worldview, the stories we believe, and rituals, and not just display them, but actually pass them down to other people, is in the family. In fact, a lot of the way we view the world, a lot of the stories we believe, and a lot of the habits we have are picked up from our parents or our extended family. And so, in secular culture or a world built off of the pursuit of happiness or the pursuit of self, the family is just another stepping stool to accomplish that. It's another way of achievement or an outlet for consuming. Marriage and children, Eli Finkel, who's a psychologist, basically he writes that since the 1960s, having children and getting married has been built on self-expression. He wrote that you look at marriage, and increasingly people are getting married for self-discovery, self-esteem, and personal growth. That's why they're getting married, is because this is a self-endeavor that I'm going on to experience more of life and to learn more about myself and to ultimately, again, self-fulfillment, which, again, places a whole lot of expectations on another person who is never designed to do that. And we all know that's not necessarily the greatest recipe for success. That's also then the reason why people are having children are for that same reason, which, again, is even more scary to think about. That even having childbearing is become about self-fulfillment and self-discovery. There's a guy, he created a movie called Avalon. He wrote a movie called Avalon, and Avalon is actually about telling a family story. And he created this movie and wrote this movie because he was realizing that around, and this is in the early 80s, that around him, in his own experience, the family went from sitting around the table and telling family stories to sitting around in a living room and watching other people's fake stories. That's the tension he was beginning to experience. And so he wrote this movie, Avalon, to kind of unpack and show the breakdown of the family and the lack of connection that was happening. Basically, I say all of this because if we're not careful, the family becomes another place to just express individualism within a certain group of people. And again, that's a dangerous place to get. And we know the family was not created to bind self-fulfillment and self-discovery. If anything, the family is the place to live out Jesus' command to die to yourself. In fact, if you want to have, and I'm sure those who are married and have been much married longer than me, understand that the give of self is what actually leads to a healthy marriage, not what we get out of it. And then again, I've experienced this by having children. Not a lot in return the early years. They bless your life, they're amazing, but they demand a whole lot more from you than they give to you. And good luck feeling self-achieved and self-fulfilled, and you will discover a whole lot about yourself, I will say that, trying to change a baby at 2 a.m, right? There's not a lot of self-achieved pursuit of happiness in that moment. But there's a lot of giving of myself, or giving of ourselves. And the reason why I say that is because the family, in our culture, again, it's become this place of self-fulfillment or pursuit of happiness, and we see it breaking down more and more. People are getting married later. At one point, it was unique to find a single-family household. Nowadays, it is just as common as two-parent households. We're probably living in a generation now, we're seeing the adult generation who's affected by the previous generation of divorce, and we're seeing kind of the third generation now affected by culture of divorce. And again, I say all that, not like, I say that like, I don't say that lightly. I say that with like knowing the weight and the heaviness of what those words mean. But you know, when we had the shift of the family becoming this self-fulfillment moment, kind of what Eli Finkel wrote about in the 1960s, like we see that pursuit of the good life in this area has really only brought destruction. It has not brought healthy things. But on the flip side, we know that God has called the family to be exponentially more than just, again, a self-fulfillment portal. even the church has romanticized the idea of marriage and family. It has made it the thing that you need to accomplish to find your next fulfillment in life. In the church, the place that has probably championing marriage and family more than anything else, has romanticized those ideas and failed to place proper expectations on either one of them. But we know as the church that the family is the key place of actually living out and displaying the kingdom. Jeff Bethke talks about the family moving from being a parking lot where, the household can very easily become a parking lot where everyone just comes and sleeps at night, but really it's just a place that we rest and recharge to go back out in the world. And sometimes you interact, sometimes you eat at the same table, sometimes you watch a show together, but really everyone's doing their own thing in the house, and it's where everyone sleeps at night, but that's really it. It's the only common denominator. It's really just a place that everyone goes to recharge and again, go about their own lives and do their own thing. A family moving from a parking lot to a mission, a family on mission. A missional team is what he calls it, or a family team is what he calls it. And this idea of a family realizing that, hey, we are a connected group of people living together on mission for something else, and actually passing that down from generation to generation, that we aren't just living our own individualistic lives with the same last name, but we are carrying a name for a greater purpose, and that's for a mission in this world. There's actually, what's interesting is in the Jewish community, which makes up a really small percentage of the world, they actually have the largest percentage of worldwide award winners within the Jewish community. So the greatest percentage, the greatest population represented in worldwide awards. So Pulitzer Peace Prize, or there's one for math and science. I just lost the name of it. There's also one for writing. Again, there's world-renowned awards that are given out every 4 years, or some of them every 7. The greatest percentage of those within a population group is Jewish people, the Jewish community. And again, they make up a even smaller percentage of the world. But a lot of the reason why people think this is because if you grow up in the Jewish community, you're not just a single individual who gets to kind of figure out what they want to do with their life. No, you are a person, a part of a story that connects way back, way before your time. That there are generations and generations of people before you who are living out the story of what it means to be someone who is in a Jewish community. And based off of that story and that greater family story, that's not just, again, their small family, not just their autonomous family, but generations and generations before them, they feel compelled, they feel connected to something greater than them, and they basically are given the necessary tools because of that to have the confidence to pursue things such as high academics, high achievement things, and then ultimately accomplishing a lot in the world. Basically, what they've discovered is that when someone feels connected to a greater story behind them, they're more likely to be successful. When they feel connected to a larger group of family, not just their autonomous family, when they feel like there's a greater family mission or a greater family name to carry, they're more likely to be successful because they're actually not just running on themselves, but they're actually running upon this foundation built generations and generations before them. And so we get to do that as a family. We get to pass this on to our children. And again, this is not how a lot of families in our culture operate at this moment. And so one of the ways that we need to shift about our family is rather than a place for us to consume and kind of again, self-expression, self-fulfillment, but see it as a portal for mission. See it as a place where we get to live out a mission in this world and actually, create missions and values that your family live by, and then live those things out and live them out in your neighborhood, in your world, in your area, and all of that. But not all of us, not everyone listening to this video or watching this video or in this room, are married and have kids, or are getting married, or are about to have kids. Not everyone is within that or building a family. And not all of us got to choose the family that we are a part of, right? I'm sure some of you would love to have that generational, calling, or being a part of generations of followers of Jesus who are doing exciting things and building the kingdom. And for some of you, you are the first person breaking family generational strongholds and living this way. And you're the person who has to dictate what the future generations look like. And so it's easy to hear teaching like this and be like, cool, that's great for those people, but man, I don't really know where I'm supposed to go with this. And so first of all, if you are that person who's the first of generations, you are the person that can actually change the entire family narrative, and you get to, the way you live your life can actually completely shift what generations below you look like. And so there's a weight to that, there's a calling to that, there's an excitement to that. But secondly, if you're not currently a part of a family, whether it's like an actual autonomous family, God has actually given us a greater family than just the family that we've been born into, or of the church. Like, the church is a greater family that we are a part of. And not to be cheesy and say like, well, hey, you're not married, but you have, you're the bride of Christ. Like, isn't that happy? Not to be cheesy in that way, but really to give emphasis to that. Like, the main metaphor Paul uses for the church is that of a family. In Romans 12, he's basically bringing the whole book of Romans to this point of saying, hey, the whole, all of this theology I've laid out, all of this definition of salvation and, the meaning of life and what God has been doing, and Jew and Gentile, all of this is coming to this point of be unified in one family as the church. Live amongst each other, love one another, be humble, submit to one another, offer your lives as sacrifices to one another. And we, whether or not we exist in a family, get to participate in the greater church family on a daily basis. And that's one of the ways we actually actively rewrite the narrative of individualism in our world, is to submit ourselves to a local church, and to be a part of it. And so if you're in this room and you are struggling to see how this family one applies to you beyond just the future, my encouragement is to seek tight-knit relationships within the church versus just going about being an individual within a church. Like, actually seek tight-knit relationships. I want to shout out Emma Conard for this, who has basically attached herself to a family in the McCoys. And if you're watching this and you have no idea who those people are, I'm sorry. But Emma has basically attached herself to the McCoys and become a part of their family and is experiencing the blessings of a family. And she hasn't just done that to receive, she's actually given a lot to that family. And she's sacrificed for that family. She gives her time, she gives her resources, and in turn has been given a lot from that family. I think that is an example of what we can do within the church, is actually seek cross-generational relationships. Seek out relationships that are older than us. Actually become the community that we want to be a part of. Actually give in the way that we want to receive. And again, finally, actually seek to be unified amongst the differing people, differing cultures, kind of where all these different backgrounds collide in the church, and we get to pursue unity that displays, hey, we actually believe that we're part of a family. And we're actually going to live like we are family, even though we don't have the same blood, but because of what Jesus has done, we actually are going to live in unity together like a family. Again, that has the ability to rewrite this narrative of individualism within an autonomous family that our culture is saying. So again, talked about family, and using either one of those to pursue the good life leads to destruction.